All right, so welcome. We're sitting down today with Peyton Smith. We're going to discuss public health versus the economy, and just kind of weigh in on that whole topic. So right now we're all finding ourselves in a very weird situation where many people are at home, a lot of people are out of work. Obviously, the economy is going to take a huge hit, and no one wants the economy to do bad. We want to make sure the economy is taken care of, but in the balance are literally people's lives that we're trying to figure out. So, Peyton, what do you think?
I mean, right now we're looking at a situation where basically all the Republican governors, well, actually, I shouldn't say that, not all of them, but a lot of them are talking about reopening. Donald Trump is talking about reopening. Ted Cruz decided to go get his hair cut at the salon owner who who closed down her shop, who kept her shop open and then got put in jail. So he's like celebrating law breaking now all of a sudden. And so it's an interesting debate. It's an interesting discussion, which we've got going on. But, when you look at the public polling, it's pretty clear. Most Americans are still in favor of keeping the lockdown. So it's weird how, some of the very loud voices that we're hearing right now are those who are interested in ending the lockdown immediately.
Yeah, because the polls I've seen, you're talking north of 80% of people say, nope, I'm not ready to go back to work. And yet, 15% of the population seems to be on the side that's actually in a lot of places what's happening, where they're opening things up and telling people to get back to work.
Well, right. I mean, a lot of it is just who do these people have in their ears, right? I mean, Donald Trump has, as part of the reopening commission, a lot of gym owners, like, large company chain gyms are a part of this conversation about when we should reopen the economy. So people who have the most to lose from the economy are the ones who have the most influence, lose in terms of the economy, I should say,
right,
as opposed to, people who are incredibly sick, people with autoimmune deficiencies, et cetera, and various kinds of sicknesses. Those are the people who don't have the ear of the president and who don't have the ear of the various governors. In some areas, it obviously makes more sense than others, right? This isn't a blanket thing. For instance, right now, the governor of Virginia, Ralph Northam, is basically talking about lifting the restrictions earlier than we were initially. And he was initially saying that Northern Virginia was going to have to open up at the same time as parts of rural America, rural Virginia, which doesn't make any sense at all, because I mean, the curves are just completely different out there as opposed to where it is up here in Northern Virginia, where, right now, basically it's peaking. It's,
And it's hard because it's on a continuum here. So there's obviously the two extremes. There's the one where no one leaves the house at all, which isn't possible because we still all need food and we need to make sure there's running water in the pipes and stuff like that. So we can't have that. And then there's the other end where we all go back to work, and it's been estimated that'd be north of 2.2 million deaths if we did that. So then the question is kind of coming together and deciding what's the answer in the middle. And it's surprising how often the scientists are kind of pushed to the side in this kind of an argument. I mean, there's a lot of people that really, Fauci is kind of the one reliable source that a lot of people are trying to listen to what he's saying. Even, Dr. Birx sometimes seems like she's kind of a Trump apologist a little bit. So it becomes difficult to know, well, where in the middle, what's the right middle ground for us to do that's going to minimize the number of lives lost and then also inflict huge damage on the economy?
Well, some things I've seen, and this is only some things I've seen, suggesting that if we were able to keep the lockdown at full force for just another 2 or 3 weeks, we actually might have been able to talk about reopening, because at that point the curve would have been flat enough in most areas where we would have been able to have enough supplies, enough resources to start talking about slowly reopening. But the issue is that if we slowly reopen but still do it too soon, then the curve goes up too quick and we're not able to get, PPE, we're not able to get masks out to enough people. And look, I'm just like anyone else. Yeah, I would love to, be able to go to the gym again, be able to, eat at restaurants again. Now, fortunately, here in Virginia, they do allow restaurants to be open, but carry out only, and you're not allowed to go inside the restaurant, and they have like people outside. So I am able to go get food from restaurants, which is nice. But it is about that balance. It is about that,
Yeah.
trying to figure that
And
out.
I think part of it is that there's so much unknowns. We're not dealing with a virus that's been around long enough that we have full knowledge about it. We're learning about things as we're trying to make decisions on them, which of course is incredibly difficult to do. We don't, there's still open questions about once you get it, are you definitely immune afterwards, or is it possible to catch it again? I mean, that's still open. They're talking about, it may be that outside it's a lot harder for the virus to survive. It can only maybe last, a very short period of time, which is still unknown. And the idea that maybe different parts of the country, so where it's warm and hot in, say, Florida, there seems to be evidence that the virus isn't going to last as long as, say, areas where it's cold and dry. I mean, it's pretty difficult, and we certainly can't treat the country as just one big, okay, everyone's got to do the same thing, because it seems to be, like you were saying, even in the same state, from rural to urban, you're going to get a different kind of different type of appropriate levels of whatever it is that you're doing, the type of distancing. So it makes it pretty difficult.
Right. And I feel really bad sometimes by, telling people, oh, well, you must social distance, you must do that, because for a lot of people, because Congress has refused to act, because the way that Congress has done this and had very measly $1,200 check one time, a lot of people are really, really struggling. And so when you turn around and tell them, okay, well, you can risk your life or you're not going to have any food. I mean, can you blame them?
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those
Right.
situations where for a lot of people who are really struggling, and people are saying, oh, well, we want to, open up, we want to go to work. There's a big impulse on parts of the left to just shame them and be like, oh, well, you're just a complete, a bootlicker for the establishment, a bootlicker for corporations. And it's like, well, look, man, like the boot's already been on us. The boot has been on us for so long. And if we don't lick the boot, then we don't eat. For a lot of people, that's the way it is. And so it's kind of like, can you blame them for, wanting to open up, for wanting to get back to work so that they can have food to feed their family? I mean, we're looking at a situation where 35 to 40% of Americans don't have enough food.
Right.
I mean, that number shocks me. They do not have enough food in their house.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, of course these people want to go to work. Now, does that mean that that's the right approach? No, it means that what we've got to do is provide economic assurances for these individuals so that they're able to listen to public health guidelines, right? Like, because it's one thing to say this is the public health guidelines, but then there's another thing to provide the resources, provide the means so that people are able to listen to public health guidelines. Because like I was saying, look at the polls. A lot of people are worried about reopening this stuff too early. A lot of people are worried about that, right?
And then you throw on top of that, like the fact that they're pushing to limit liabilities of companies when you come back.
Oh.
And it's like, okay, I understand you can't just take every person who gets the virus that works at a company and blame the company for that. But if the company is not following practices that are seen as, sound scientific practices to keep the virus from spreading and making a good faith effort to protect the employees of that company, they should absolutely be liable. You don't have to look very far back in our history to see kids working in factories. I mean, if companies can get away with it and it will save them $1, they'll do it. Right? That's capitalism, right? That's the extreme end that capitalism approaches is, oh, we can save $1 by cutting out these safety standards, then let's do it. And it's weird to me that seems to be so acceptable to so many people that, McConnell and these people are trying to limit those liabilities.
That's like the main thing that they're pushing for, because they know that that's the thing that business really wants, because that also will increase the speed at which businesses reopen too, right? They want to get the economy up as fast as possible. They want to get, the people who are listening, who are, who have their ear. They want to give them what they want as quick as possible. That's the main thing that they want, to not have any kind of issues with liability, because that's a big concern for them. That's a big worry for them. And I'm worried that actually might get through, because if the entire Republican Party is like, that's the thing that we want, I don't know if the Democrats are going to have the balls to be able to fight that.
I think we've gotten to a point where if the Democrats want anything, and it could be argued they barely got anything so far, but if they want anything more, I think they're going to have to end up agreeing. Since they've already given the Republicans so much of what they want, I think they're going to have to agree to this and say, okay, we'll let you have this if you give us this other stuff over here.
Also, though, it's not entirely clear what the Democrats want, right?
Right.
Like, it's completely, it's a mess. I mean, we saw Nancy Pelosi come out with a few things today, but of course, right now, what are we talking about? What are Republicans talking about? The debt, the deficit.
Right.
We got to worry about the debt and deficit during a time when we're in trouble. No, no, no. This is the time to not be worried about the debt and deficit. If there's a time
Right.
to be worried about the debt and deficit, ironically, it's the good times. That's the time when you should be worried.
Mm-hmm.
When you shouldn't be worried, if there is a time, is right now. So, it's a mess, and it's completely backwards. It's completely backwards.
Yeah, and to the point you were talking about there's a lot of people that are hurting in this country. I mean, that would be pretty scary if you were waiting around to go back and realize you might be going into a situation where there's no consequence for your employer to really take care of you and make sure that the proper safety procedures are in place. I mean, it really makes you think about the term human resources. Like, is that really what we're doing? Is we're just throwing humans, knowing many of them are not going to make it, and we can just fill them with some other desperate person that will take that place on the assembly line or in the factory because the companies don't have to fall into line.
And there was another just crazy thing. I mean, it was on the Wall Street Journal. I think Nathan Robinson was talking a little bit about this. Wall Street Journal saying that part of the reason why we need to get back to work is because people are losing their insurance because they're losing their jobs. Like, well, look, it doesn't have to be that way. There's all kinds of different solutions.
Right.
Basically, every other industrialized country doesn't have the mess of the system that we have right now. So why is it the case that that's an argument for getting back to work as opposed to an argument for changing the system? Because, yeah, I mean, our healthcare system is a mess. Everybody's been saying that. Everybody agrees. Even Republicans agree when you ask them. But then we can't seem to actually change it.
Yeah, and the fact that we were weeks away from a disaster, from this kind of disaster that we're in, where the people are actually hurting. I mean, the economy was going to hurt no matter what, but where people are this bad off tells you something about the system we were in. And people excuse it and go, oh, well, that's because of this virus. No one saw it coming. But that's the whole idea. We want a system in place that has that ability to at least somewhat absorb this kind of a shock and keep people...
I mean, when we talk about Boeing, for instance, we were having a debate at the very beginning about how we were going to bail out Boeing. And then suddenly the idea got floated that, oh, well, maybe we'll just take ownership of Boeing we'll buy a stake in Boeing. And suddenly Boeing CEO was like, well, if that's the conditions, then we don't want to bail out. To which I say, well, then you didn't need a bailout.
Right. Then you didn't need it. Right.
The idea that they couldn't go to a bank and get a loan, a low interest loan, is ridiculous. The amount of assets, the amount of collateral that a place like Boeing has is incredible. Yeah. They have enough collateral to cover without a doubt, how much of a loan they would need. And so, yeah, they could get a loan from someone somewhere because someone would be like, okay, well, I can get a lot of money out of this. Instead, the American people gave them a bailout, and they're already talking about laying off people. And we've already seen some rumors suggesting that, at least in the case of United, that even though they got a bailout, that they're already cutting hours, which was against the conditions and against the terms. But apparently that seems like what they're doing.
Yeah, and some of those companies, I mean, early on, that was a discussion about, sort of putting ethical considerations into should certain companies get money, and that obviously gets very murky. But a company like Boeing, which already had some pretty intense stuff going on with their business, where they were, because of the trouble they've had in the last couple of years, was looking kind of sketchy. But they have a pretty sketchy history of treating their employees, really trying to bend, like when I was up in Washington, they were really trying to stick it to Washington and, trying to get concessions about how they run their business in that state in a way that really isn't working for people. It's really not working for states. It seems like there isn't really, I guess we're getting a little off topic here, but there's not like it should be painful for these companies to take all this money. There should be some type of yes, we're taking all this money, but we're giving up, a certain percentage of our company that we're going to have to buy back later, or whatever it is that they want to do. It seems like just blindly handing out money was not the way to do this.
Yeah, well, I don't even know that it is too off topic, because we're having a discussion about how we could actually balance health, health of the public health, and the health of the economy, which, the point though that I think is relevant here, and the point that we're getting at here, is that the economy is not a static thing, right? The economy can exist in different structures, in different organizations. Capitalism exists in a different way in literally every single country. In places like Germany, workers have a say on the board. Environmentalists have a say on the board. So you could argue, I mean, yeah, you could say, yeah, that's still capitalism because there's still private ownership. But you could also argue that it's a different form of capitalism, right? And so the fact that reforming capitalism, or even just, moving beyond capitalism, et cetera, like, not even going into the question of moving beyond capitalism, the fact that those kinds of questions about seriously reforming the way that we think about capitalism aren't even on the table, I think just goes to the narrowness of debate that we see in this country, where the things that are considered legitimate discourse is so narrow that so many people resent it. I mean, you wonder why there so many people are becoming independents, right? Because people feel like, hold on, my views aren't represented by either party. The way that I feel about the world just isn't represented anywhere, and I think people really resent that. People really, really resent that.
And we both have political channels. We're obviously into politics, but it seems like the average person doesn't want to spend hours each night combing over politics and figuring out, they just want to be able to trust their government is going to go in and do what's best for them and make these kinds of decisions correctly, so that they can trust, when I go back to work, it's going to be safe for me to go back to work. When I go back to work, I'm not going to have to worry that my life is in danger, so that I can, push product out the door. Seems like we're maybe kind of letting people down a little bit. So, all right. Well, that was a great conversation with Peyton Smith over at Fourth Radical. Go check out his YouTube channel. Some great videos over there. Thanks again, Peyton, for having that discussion, and we will talk to you later.
Thanks for having me.